Hello, everybody. It is Brandon, and once again, welcome back to Marotta Media. Usually, at the end of every year, I rush to get my best and worst movies of the year list out, but I just realized in the last year or so that they come out when they come out. There's really no rush. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to make them, because I will make these no matter how long they take. I already went through my worst movies of 2025. Now it's time to discuss the best movies of 2025. And if I'm being honest, I think 2025 was a pretty tremendous year for film. I mean, I say every year is a good year for film, but it usually is if you're just a fan of movies. But I really mean it when I say that this year there were so many damn great movies that came out. And just like I've done the last few years, there were too many of them, and I didn't want to leave a lot of them out, so we're going to go over my top 30. But if you guys have subscribed to me for a while, then you will know the drill. But in case you're new here, what I like to do is go over my picks 30 through 11 as quickly as possible, and I will get into my more in-depth thoughts on the top 10. I may have a thing or two to say about the movies 30 through 11, but for the most part, I'm just going to zoom through them because they are worth mentioning at the very least. So without further ado, let's just get started. These movies rocked. These are the 30 best movies of 2025. Starting us off at the bottom at number 30 is one of the most underseen comedy movies of the year, and that is The Wedding Banquet. At 29, I have Richard Linklater's Blue Moon. What if I said that Ethan Hawke gave the best performance of 2025? Because I think a majority of people would agree with me if they've seen it. At 28, I have Bradley Cooper's third film as a director, Is This Thing On? At 28, I have one of the movie events of the summer, F1. At 26, I have another underseen romantic comedy, Splitsville. At 25, I have the sequel to the phenomenon of 2024, Wicked, and that was Wicked for Good. At 24, I have one of two great movies that Steven Soderbergh made in 2025, Presence. At 23, I have one of the year's biggest surprises, and that was Roofman. At 22, I have another one of the year's biggest surprises, and that was Darren Aronofsky's Caught Stealing. At 21, I have the Philippou brothers' sophomore outing after Talk to Me, Bring Her Back. A movie that was so depressing, but in a good way, but I felt like I really needed a hug once the credits started rolling. At 20, I have 2025's Palme d'Or winner at the Cannes Film Festival, It Was Just an Accident. At 19 is another film that I believe was so underseen, and it should be seen by more because it's so sweet, and that was The Ballad of Wallace Island. At 18, I have, yet another movie that not enough people talked about, and that was Freaky Tales. At 17, I have Ephus. At 16, I have one of the year's tear-jerkers in Hamnet. And at 15, I have one of the most beautiful movies of 2025, Train Dreams. At 14, I have one of the year's most visceral experiences that I've had at the theater, and that was Warfare. I heard a lot of people say that this movie was actually pro-military propaganda, and I really want to know what movie those people watched. This film is about as anti-war as you can get. At 13, I have the third installment into what is currently the Knives Out trilogy, Wake Up Dead Man. At 12, I have Joachim Trier's newest film, Sentimental Value. And just missing my top 10 at number 11 is what I believe to be the funniest movie of the year, Friendship. Well, those were what I believe to be the best movies of the year, 30 through 11. Now let's get into the top 10. Kicking off the top 10, we have one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and it personally met the hype for me, even though it didn't meet the hype for a lot of people. Superman. And when I say people who this movie didn't meet the hype for, I mean, you know who. I don't even want to say their name, but they're fans of that other director that made a previous Superman movie. James Gunn had a hell of a task in front of him rebooting the DC universe because the DC Extended Universe was, for lack of a better term, a huge failure. There were hardly any good movies in that universe, so it was only right to start over. And I think Superman was a phenomenal start. This version of Superman is what I want Superman to be. I respect the DC Extended Universe going for a more darker approach, but I feel like that doesn't work for Superman. When I watch a Superman movie, I want to feel happy. I want to feel hopeful. And that's exactly what I felt when I was watching this movie. This is one of those movies that just feels like a beacon of hope. If I'm ever having a bad day, I can absolutely see myself turning this movie on to cheer myself up. I think it's so well made. The CGI looks great. In some parts, it doesn't look great in others. The action is fantastic. It has a great story placing Superman into a modern day world dealing with things like social media and things like that. And I think the casting here is truly perfect. David Corenswet did such a great job as Superman. Rachel Brosnahan was tailor-made for Lois Lane. And I was skeptical, but Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, yeah, he killed it. And I think this was far and away the best superhero movie of 2025. At number 9, I have what I believe to be the cinematic equivalent of a warm hug, Rental Family. Rental Family is a film that shines a spotlight on what is actually a very real business in Japan. These agencies that will rent out people to play familial roles in their lives. So you can literally rent out a person to be your friend for the day or be your girlfriend for the day. And as sweet as this movie is, it actually calls into question the ethics and the morals of this occupation. I wouldn't say it necessarily condemns them either, because these agencies clearly have the best interest of people at heart, but just the way they're going about it could be a little bit better. But nonetheless, this movie was just an absolute joy to watch. Just like Superman, this is a film that I can absolutely see myself rewatching if I'm ever feeling down, because I just felt so happy while watching this. The movie is a little bit sad, don't get me wrong, but it isn't overwhelmingly sad. This is one of those movies that I would say is the textbook definition of crowd pleaser. I would recommend anybody watch Rental Family. No matter what your film interests are, I think that this is a film that would appeal to anyone and everyone. And not to mention just how perfect the casting is here. Brendan Fraser is one of the nicest and most down-to-earth people working in the industry today. And that's exactly what this movie is. It's very nice, down-to-earth, and his character, Philip, feels like a character that was written with him specifically in mind. As I said, I would recommend this movie to anyone, so whenever you get the chance, please go watch Rental Family. At number 8, I have one of the year's biggest surprises, and that was Twinless. I haven't seen a whole lot of other people have this in their top 10, so I feel special. But this movie absolutely deserves to be in everyone's top 10. I first heard about Twinless at the beginning of 2025 when it was premiering at Sundance, and it got taken away from people who were screening the festival remotely, because people were leaking videos and pictures of the film and sharing them online, so everybody lost their privileges for it. And I really hope it was worth it, because this movie is phenomenal. Twinless is such an interesting exploration of loneliness and the bond that twins have. And this movie discusses that and how devastating it would be to lose the person who you've literally spent your entire life with from conception. But the best part about Twinless is that very early on in the film, there is a reveal, and that reveal took me so off guard, and from that point on, I was locked in. It was literally the equivalent of this meme. I had to sit forward in my chair once this reveal happened. I was like, oh my god, this is getting really good. Of course, it helps that the two leads, Dylan O'Brien and James Sweeney, who also served as the writer and director for this film, are fantastic together. I haven't seen any other movie from James Sweeney, but if he can write and direct another movie just like this while simultaneously providing an excellent performance, then sign me up for whatever he makes in the future. At 7, I have what I believe to be the most memed movie of the year. Well, a memed movie that was good. One Battle After Another. Paul Thomas Anderson does not miss, and he most certainly did not miss with this one. One Battle After Another was one of those movies that you just have to see to believe, especially on the big screen. I feel sorry for anybody who watched this movie on a TV for the first time, because I feel like their experience would not have been the same. Everything about this movie is just so well done, from the direction to the score, the cinematography, the editing, the sound. The acting all around here is just phenomenal. Leonardo DiCaprio is phenomenal, as he always is. Sean Penn provides probably the best supporting performance of the year. And of course, you have the other supporting performances from Tiana Taylor, Regina Hall, Benicio del Toro. And I also need to give major props to newcomer Chase Infinity in her first ever film role. Going toe-to-toe with people like Leonardo DiCaprio and Sean Penn, two of possibly the greatest actors who ever lived, for your first ever movie is damn impressive. One battle after another is very dramatic, but it's also very hilarious. Some of the funniest scenes of the year are in this movie. As I said, there's been countless memes. You've probably seen that one of Benicio del Toro saying, "I've had a few." A few what? A few small beers. I don't know what it is, but scenes like that are just so memorable. And as funny as this movie is, it is also discussing very serious topics. But the one that I picked up the most on is how evil will always come around every so often, but there will always be good in the world to fight against it. And that's what this movie was all about, especially when it came to the ending. The older generation making way for the new generation while also finding a new place for themselves in this world. At number 6 on my best of the year list, I have the third collaboration between Emma Stone and Yorgos Lanthimos in as many years, Begonia. I really love these collaborations between Emma Stone and Yorgos Lanthimos. I loved Poor Things, and hell, I even loved Kinds of Kindness. But I think Begonia is better than both of them. This movie is literally just a battle of wits and mind games between two characters who believe that they are smarter than the other. Those characters being Michelle, played by Emma Stone, and Teddy, played by Jesse Plemons, both of whom provide two of the best performances of the year. Begonia is a pretty unsettling film because it discusses the dangers of paranoia and believing conspiracy theories with no real evidence. And all of it leads to what I believe to be the most jaw-dropping ending of the year. I did have quite a few gripes with the ending, but just the overall shock value of it was nothing short of mesmerizing. When this movie ended, I literally sat in my theater seat in silence for, I think, a good 10 minutes. Begonia is a phenomenal film, but it is a very heavy watch, and even though I loved it, it might be a while before I revisit this movie. Alright, we have reached the top 5, and beginning my top 5 is a movie that I feel like a lot of my subscribers are going to be shocked is in this spot. K-pop Demon Hunters. I know a lot of you are probably silently judging me behind that screen, but I have no shame. I fucking love this movie. I vividly remember one night over the summer, one of my friends texted me and just innocently asked me if I had watched K-pop Demon Hunters yet. At the time, I had never even heard of the movie, but I did see it on Letterboxd because a few of my mutuals were logging it. And I wasn't doing anything that night. It had good reviews. I was like, you know what? I'll watch this movie. I sat down and watched it that night, and my life has not been the same since. K-pop Demon Hunters is without question the best animated film of the year. This movie has absolutely stunning animation and cinematography, which is expected since this is a Sony Pictures animation film. But on top of the incredible animation, the voice acting here is just superb, and this movie has one of the best soundtracks that I have ever heard. I posted about this in December, but this movie's soundtrack completely took over my Spotify Wrapped at the end of the year. I have been listening to this soundtrack nonstop since the summer, and I really don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And you might think that K-pop Demon Hunters has nothing to offer in terms of a story, but it really does. This is a very deep and personal story about identity and acceptance. I need a Blu-ray of this, I need a 4K of it, I need a sequel to it, there's supposedly an animated short coming out that's a prequel to it, I need that right now. I need to buy a record player so I can have this album on vinyl, I need it all. I love this movie, dude. Alright, enough with my glazing, as I'm sure some people will call it. Let's move on to number 4. At number 4, I have the newest film from master filmmaker Park Chan-wook, No Other Choice. No Other Choice might be the most timely film that I have ever seen in my entire life. Even though this movie takes place in Korea, the themes it discusses hit very close to home for me as an American. The job market and the economy at the time I'm recording this video are really, really bad right now. And No Other Choice discusses how far a person would go in order to obtain the one thing that basically defines them that was stripped from them, their job. What do you do when you lose your job, especially if that is the only job you've ever done, the only job you've ever known? Are you going to take extreme measures like the lead character Mansu does in this film and eliminate the competition for a new job by any means necessary? It might seem a little far-fetched, but at the same time, I could totally see someone doing this in the real world. As timely as the themes are, this is also one of the most masterfully made movies I've seen from a filmmaking standpoint. The sound mixing is incredible. I think the soundtrack is great. The cinematography and editing are just utterly mind-blowing. Park Chan-wook really knows how to film transitions and be as creative with those transitions as possible. And some of the camera movements that he has in this movie are just so utterly ridiculous. There is one scene that you might have seen online involving an iPad being passed around. It's so simple, but it's just so unbelievable. And as I was watching this movie, I was legitimately sitting there wondering how they pulled this off. But at the same time, I kind of don't want to know because I just want to live in the mystery of it. And that really is the beauty of filmmaking. At number 3, I have one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and I'm so happy that it met my expectations. Weapons. I was a gigantic fan of Zach Cregger's first film, Barbarian, back in 2022, so I was so excited to see whatever he did next. I love this movie so much, I actually went and saw it on consecutive days. I went and saw it on opening night, and then the following morning, I went and saw it with a friend who wanted to see it. And that second viewing cemented my feelings that this movie is fantastic. And you could probably tell how much I love this movie because of my shirt, and look, I've even got the 4K right there. I got it for Christmas. But going into this movie, I wasn't really sure what to expect because I think the marketing of it was so well done. But it showcases a story of all of these kids from one teacher's classroom that all get up out of their houses in the middle of the night, run into the darkness, and nobody knows where they went and why. And the mystery of it all really intrigues you, but the story is told from all of these different perspectives. And you see all of these perspectives slowly start to intertwine throughout the film, and I think that it was so well written. And this movie is hilarious. I mean, Barbarian was hilarious, but this movie was also really funny despite its incredibly dark subject matter. It discusses communal grief and how people react in times of uncertainty. And how people, especially parents in this case, just want answers into something that is so scary. Something so scary that they really can't comprehend it. But the scariest thing about it is that there really might not be any answers. I think this movie was utterly brilliant, and if it wasn't for this next entry, it would be my favorite horror movie of 2025. And in the runner-up spot, I have Sinners. Sinners should really be proud of itself because this movie held my top spot all year from about April to literally the day after Christmas. That should probably give away what number 1 is. But Sinners held my top spot for 8 months, but it deserves it. This movie is remarkable. I know a lot of people will say that Sinners is overrated and it's really not that good, but it really is that good, people. I have seen every movie from Ryan Coogler thus far, and this is easily one of the best movies that he has made. He perfectly blends all of these different genres together, from gangster movies to westerns to even musicals and, of course, vampire movies. He takes inspiration from all of these things and puts it into a big, beautiful pot, stirs it up, and makes it work. And Sinners is a movie that discusses the importance of music and the preservation of culture. With one of the best leading performances of the year from Michael B. Jordan playing twins Smoke and Stack. But granted, it's not just him. I would say just about every performance in this movie is nothing short of amazing. This is one of those movies that is so layered. It's definitely one that would benefit from a second watch to pick up on things that you didn't necessarily see the first time. And on top of that, this movie also has one of the best soundtracks of the year. This is another one of those soundtracks I've been listening to all year. And this is absolutely a movie that I will watch again before the Oscars, because I think this movie is going to be getting a lot of nominations. But as I said, Sinners was dethroned by this next movie literally the day after Christmas. I've never had a sudden shift for my favorite movie of the year that late in the year. And you should know what it is. with Marty Supreme. Director Josh Safdie makes a movie without the help of his brother Benny by his side, who went on to make The Smashing Machine earlier this year. But together, those brothers made some fantastic films like Good Time and Uncut Gems, which was one of my favorite movies of 2019. And I would say that Marty Supreme has a lot in common with Uncut Gems, but in this case, it's about ping pong instead of basketball. Marty Supreme is a 2.5-hour thrill ride that is sure to leave you feeling anxious and uneasy by the end of it. This movie is just a series of situations that the protagonist Marty Mauser finds himself in on his journey to become the greatest table tennis player of all time. And Marty himself is an objectively awful character. And by awful, I mean unlikable, because he is just so selfish. He does not care who or what he destroys in order to obtain his dream. And I think it's interesting to follow characters like that. Just because a character is unlikable doesn't mean the movie is endorsing them or their actions. Because I've seen a lot of people say that about this movie. But Marty Supreme is a period piece that takes place in the 50s, and it has ridiculously good needle drops from songs that were made in the 80s. Like Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears and Forever Young by Alphaville. And typically those kinds of needle drops for songs that were made in a future decade as opposed to the decade that the movie takes place in, that really bothers me. But in this case, it really works. Marty Supreme has some of the most bombastic cinematography, editing, musical scores, and cues that I've seen in any film this year. And it still has not left my mind since I watched it, and I even went and watched it again on New Year's Eve with some friends. That is how good I thought this movie was. Well, that is it, everybody. Those were my favorite movies of 2025. If you guys saw any of these movies, or if you love them as much as I did, then let me know, and comment your favorite movies of the year down below. I would love to know. But since this video is coming out after New Year's, I hope you all had a Merry Christmas. I hope you all had a Happy New Year. And guys, I think it's time for me to face facts. I simply just do not have time to post videos about every single movie that I watch on YouTube, unfortunately. If this was my full-time job, I could do this all day, seriously. But that's not me saying I'm quitting, I'm just saying I don't have a lot of time to spare, so I'm only really gonna try to post reviews when I can. But if you guys want to keep up with everything that I have been watching, then you can follow me on other platforms. You can find all of my platforms right here. You can follow me on TikTok and Instagram, where I review every new release that I watch. I make videos on TikTok, and I make written reviews on Instagram, because it's a whole different form of expression. And you can also follow me on Letterboxd if you want to just keep up with everything that I have been watching. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter as well. Still not calling it X. But if you guys like this video, be sure to hit that thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe. And if you want to see my best movies of the year list from 2023 and 2024, then I will link those right over here. Other than that, I hope you all have a tremendous rest of your day. Happy New Year, everyone, and I will see you all next time.